surprise overlapping meetings are not that common. If you have two jobs in the same time zone, those meetings that are scheduled like the daily scrum, there, the probability might be higher here, because usually business, will do that meeting at like the same times, 9. But I've seen, it's not a law, right? Like they don't have to have the daily scrum at 9 or at 10, right? So there's a lot of variability, but random, like conflicting meetings, the probability of that is actually 0.4%. But if they do happen, which sometimes they do, and you have to deal with the fact of the schedule meetings that might have constant conflicts, like daily scrums, managing them is actually simple. And this is in the course I go in depth about types of meetings, right? Because there are different types of meetings. For instance, in the book and in the course, I mentioned that there are the distinction between active meetings and passive meetings, and semi-active meetings or semi-passive meetings, right? And so, for instance, for me, this is an active meeting because I'm presenting, right? Like there's no way my presence is not required in this meeting with you guys. But for you, this webinar is a passive meeting. You're not participating actively, right? Like you're going to ask me questions at the end, but right now I'm not like, hey, John, tell me what you think of this, right? Like, and you have to turn on your camera. So imagine, handling two active meetings, right? Like handling two meetings where you have to present, where you have to share your screen, where you have to be engaged, is different than having two meetings like how you're experiencing this webinar, which is, you're just listening. So the key, I go in depth in the course how to handle conflicting meetings, but one of the keys is simply just let me tell you, and this is what I did in the previous webinar. You train yourself basically, like if you have two active meetings, if you have two conflicts, you reschedule, right? Like, and so the paradox of meetings is that the more your presence is required in a meeting, the more important your presence is, the more power you have over the schedule, right? So I set the schedule. Again, I'm in an active meeting right now with you guys, an active call. Who set the schedule? I set it, right? Like you guys didn't get to choose when the webinar was. I chose it, right? So if it's not convenient, if this time was not convenient for me, I wouldn't have scheduled it. So imagine, so you have that power over your schedule when the call or the meeting is active, where your participation is required. And in the course, I teach you, common excuses, so you don't have to lie, and you don't create a pattern, because that's another thing that's important, is that you don't want to create a pattern of behavior where you're always sneaking out of meetings or rescheduling them using the same excuse or the same pattern of behavior. Like they always schedule a call this time, this day, and you're never available, right? Like, so I teach you how to avoid those things, how to avoid creating red flags with your employers as you handle the conflicting meetings, right? But if for instance, if that's the case of active meetings, but if it's a passive or semi-passive meeting or semi-active, where you're just listening most of the time, well, that's a lot easier, right? And again, I go in the course, teach, some exercises, you got to learn how to pick up your name being called, how to pick up on the signals of like, oh, it might be my turn to speak, right? Anyway, this has gone for long enough, this thing on conflicting meetings.